We'll look at 5 common API myths, and the first is forcing all logic into Program.cs. And it's no great surprise that developers get confused by this one, because all of Microsoft's examples are in Program.cs. So we're on one of their documentation pages, create a minimal web API. This example here explicitly says that it's in Program.cs. And if we scroll down, they've added all these endpoints, but they've added them all into Program.cs. So it looks extremely messy, and if you've got so many endpoints, then the file is just going to be unmanageable. But there is a way you can fix it. So we've got these API endpoints in Program.cs. They're all products endpoints. There's one with a map get, post, put, and delete. We're going to move them out of Program.cs, and we'll move them into this class called products endpoints. Within that, we're going to create a static method. We're going to give it a return type of web application. When you call builder.build, it creates a web application instance. We're going to call it map products endpoints. And we'll pass in the this keyword to make it an extension method, the web application, and we'll call it app. And then we can paste what we just cut out of Program.cs. We also need to return an instance of the app. So that on its own is good enough, but what we can also do is, because they're all prefixed with the same URL, so API/version/products, we can add this into a products group. So we'll create a products group, and to do that we call app.mapGroup, and because they're all going to be prefixed with the same URL, we can use the URL from there and add it in there like that. So because of that, we can change each of the types to products group. We also don't want to have this prefix there because we've got it prefixed in the map group method. So we'll remove API/version/products in each of them. And lastly, we've got this with API version set, but it's set in each one. How do you think we can group that together? We can add it to the products group instead. So we'll add it on like that, and that means that we can remove it in each one. And we're going to run our API endpoint just to make sure that it still works in our Swagger documentation. Okay, at the moment it's throwing an error. Why do you think that is? We're not actually calling this map products endpoints. That's something I forgot to do. I'm going to call app.mapproductsendpoints, and hopefully that will resolve it for us. And there's our endpoints. We're just going to check that one of them works, and we're getting a successful response. It would be good if we had something like controllers for minimal APIs. With controllers, you put each group into a class, which is normally in the controllers folder. You inherit the controller base class, you specify the group attributes needed, and then for each of the methods, you've got your logic, and you've also got any attributes that are needed for it. I think that's something we need for minimal APIs. Otherwise, developers are going to have a free-for-all as to how they structure the logic. It'd be good to see that in a future release of .NET. So we've established that we don't need to force all logic into Program.cs. If you like the look of minimal APIs, I have a Minimal APIs for Complete Beginners course, which you can view at roundthecode.com/min1. There's also a link for it in the YouTube video description. Stay tuned to the end and I'll show you what you'll learn in the course. Myth number 2 is difficult to unit test. So one of the problems with these minimal APIs and with all the examples that you'll see is that they use lambda statements or expressions. You can't unit test them, but what you can do is you can move these statements into a method. So we're going to create a split tab. We're going to move this one into a method. So we'll create a new public static method. It returns the type of getProductDTO, so that's what we need to add in there. We're going to call the method get. It passes in a parameter of ID, so we'll pass that in there. And then we're going to return a new instance of the getProductDTO. And from there, we can remove all of this, and we can add in the get method. Now we can add unit tests for this method. We've created an XUnit test project. We've created a test class. We're now going to create a test method. To do that, we need to mark it with fact, and we'll create the method. We're going to call it get when called returns expected result. So we'll set an ID variable with a value of 9. And then we'll call products endpoints.get and pass in the ID. So that is that here. And then we write our assert method. So we say assert equivalent. So the act is equivalent to a new getProductDTO with the ID. We can now run that test method, and that has passed, meaning that we've successfully tested our minimal API endpoint. It's just as easy to unit test as controllers. Next myth is that it lacks essential features. And that simply isn't true. We're going to show you how to add authorization and go through some of the other essential features that it has. With Program.cs, we've added this API key policy. What this will do is it will add an API key header to the request. This is added in the API key authentication handler. If it's not ABC, it will fail the authentication. In the minimal API endpoints, we can add it to each individual endpoint, or we can add it to the group. We're going to add it to the group. We need to call require authorization, and we can specify the policy name if we have more than one. So the policy name is API key policy. We'll add that onto there. And now we're going to run that. So let's add the value of ABC and press authorize. Let's run this endpoint. We're getting a 200 response. We'll try one of the others as well. So we'll try the delete one. That's returning a 200 response as well. Let's now change the key. So if we log out of that and we just change it to 345, we execute that again. We're now getting a 401 unauthorized response. Validation is another thing that's now supported in minimal APIs as part of the .NET 10 update. So we'll create product DTO. We'll put in required in there. To make this work though, we do need to add something to builder.services. We need to call builder.services.addValidation. In the products endpoints in the post method, we've got the create product DTO. Let's run that and see if the validation is going to work. So we run our post. We'll have an empty name in there. And of course, we need to add the header key in there. Otherwise, we're going to get the 401 unauthorized. Let's run that again. And yeah, that's returning a 400 response. The name field is required. We put a value in. And that returns a 201 successful response. We've also established that it supports root groups, unit testing, OpenAPI and Swagger integration, as well as API versioning. So that debunks that myth. Myth number 4 is OpenAPI documentation is complex to set up. You can add the expected response codes to the OpenAPI documentation based on the minimal API's return type. So with this, we want to return either a 200 if it's successful or 404 if it's not found. We change the return type to results, and then within that, we create a generic type of OK with a getProductDTO type. We can also specify that it will return a not found as well. So we need to make some changes in the method. So we'll create a dummy variable, and we can say if A does not equal 1, then we return typed results dot not found. Otherwise, we return typed results dot OK, and we pass in the getProductDTO instance. What do you think will be added to the OpenAPI documentation in Swagger when we run this? Let's take a look. So it now says that the responses could be a 200 OK, and it's got an example of what value it will return. Otherwise, it could return a 404 not found. But there are ways you can do it manually as well. We can add produce this validation problem. By default, this will add a 400 bad request to the OpenAPI documentation. We can also call produce this problem and specify the status code. So if we wanted to add a 500 internal server error, we'd do it like this, and we'll see it in the OpenAPI documentation when we run the application. So in that endpoint, we've got the 400 bad request, and we've also got the 500 internal server error. We've established that OpenAPI documentation is relatively easy to set up. The final myth is that it's only suitable for small projects. And I think developers get confused with minimal meaning the word small, but that simply isn't the case. You could run 300 or 400 API endpoints with minimal APIs and not have any issues. The best way to do that is to group it into different classes, like what we did with the products. So if we wanted to add some category endpoints, I would add that into a separate class and then map it from Program.cs. Now admittedly controllers has more features, but that means that minimal APIs are going to be more lightweight, so they're definitely production ready in my opinion. As I mentioned earlier, I have a minimal APIs for complete beginners course. Microsoft now recommends that when you create a web API, you use minimal APIs. This is what you'll learn in the course. So on the left hand side, these are the sections that you're going to learn. We use .NET 10 and Visual Studio 2026, and I personally waited until .NET 10 and Visual Studio 2026 were released before I recorded the videos. So we start off with the introduction, and there's some free previews so you can actually check out some of the videos before you purchase the course. We start off with finding out what minimal APIs are, and then we find out of what you should know before taking the course. So you should have some C# knowledge, and it goes through in the video what you need to know. Then we talk about setting up your environment. So that means installing Visual Studio 2026 or updating it, downloading the .NET 10 SDK if required, and you also need to install SQL Server. After that, we create the .NET projects and install the NuGet packages. So when creating the .NET projects, we use clean architecture. So not only do we have an API project, but we also have an application and an infrastructure. The infrastructure will contain the database logic, whereas the application project will add the business logic. We also set up Entity Framework Core in your application. After that, we set up SQL Server Database and integrate with Entity Framework Core. And this is the last preview video where you create the DB context entity. If you decide to purchase the course, then you'll get a different screen, which I'll show you now. When you purchase the course, you get a screen like this. So sticking with section 3, which is setting up SQL Server, after we created a DB context entity, we also create the migration. So the migration will use EF Core migrations, and not only will it create the table, but it will actually create the database as well. So if that's something you've never used, then you're in for something new. We'll also set up the business layer service as well. And then section 4 is where we create the minimal API endpoints. So we do one for each HTTP method, and we also add additional methods as well. We also add an endpoint filter. After that, we implement login with Serilog, so we install Serilog, we write a couple of different log entries, and we also implement a global exception handler. This means that we can control the response of an internal server error. After that, we configure authorization and authentication using an API key, so we actually create the authentication handler, we register it in the web API, and we also configure Swagger so you can actually add it when testing it through Swagger. Throughout the project, we test our endpoints using Swagger. After that, we add unit testing and we use XUnit version 3. So if you've not used that before, you'll be able to install it and create a new XUnit 3 test project. And we write test methods for each of the endpoints that we create. Now you may have noticed this resources drop down for each of the videos as I was going through the sections. This contains the code examples for each of the videos. Source code beginning is the code state at the beginning of the video, whereas source code end is the code state at the end of the video. Each link will take you to a branch in a GitHub repository, so it will represent the branch here. What you can do then is you can check that code out onto your machine and you can follow along at home as you're watching the video. To view the course, go to roundthecode.com/min1. There's also a link for it in the YouTube video description. And if you want to learn more .NET tips, then watch this video next. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.